Welcome to another episode of Fight the Burnout. This recording is coming in live from Redding, California. I am here in the United States for the next 2.5 months at this time of the recording. We've got a real special guest. I met him a little while back and we had a great conversation. So I'm really excited to get him going and live on here. But I want to before we start, my tongue's not working today. Before we start, I do want to remind you, take one thing away from today. I say this at the start of pretty much every episode, take one thing away, because if you implement and you take action on that one thing, you'll actually be way further along than if you just sit there and just hear all this stuff and never actually take action on it. So really do that. This episode is sponsored by Create From Why. It is my company where we help law enforcement eliminate burnout. It's fighting it, but it's also eliminating it. There is ways to eliminate that burnout. You do have to be rigorous with it, but you can eliminate it. So that's what we do. We also do have a motorcycle retreat coming up here on the 20th of May, full VIP, all inclusive. You literally put the money down and turn up to Phoenix, and we look after you for 7 days. 100% VIP. You don't even pull your wallet out. First round of drinks is even on us. So if you want to know more information about that, links down in the description, but you can go to motorcyclemastermind.com and find out everything there and book a time to have a conversation with me, because I do vet everybody that's coming on board because we want to make sure that you're a good fit. So without further ado, we have Jeff today. He is a police officer in the Phoenix area, still active duty, so we won't say exactly where he works, but some people that listen to this might already know. But Jeff, I like to let you introduce yourself because you know yourself better than I do. I can read what you wrote, but hey, I may as well let you introduce yourself. So why don't you take it away? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about how you got to where you are now and your law enforcement background.
Great, Chris, and I do appreciate you having me on. The things you said even in your opening about people building resiliency and not just trying to fight burnout, but eliminate it. I mean, if that was something that even one person can do, then the effort you're putting in is worthwhile, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we need to
Just
take steps.
one.
We need to be active. And this isn't done in a bubble. And I'm sure for your listeners, they would understand that it's a tribe of people that build all this together. One person can make a substantial difference. I'm a big fan of that. One person with the right platform can make a tremendous difference, but a tribe of people can change a culture.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're going for. Me and you have talked offline a little bit about that. But for me, my name is Jeff Daukas. I'm coming up on 50 years old. I still believe I'm in my 20s. So, those days apparently are gone. All the little injuries remind me of that, but we'll talk later on about that. I've been involved in law enforcement since May of '99 when I became an adult probation officer with the county over here. And I was working drugs. And I worked gang caseload for about 2.5 years, which was crazy intense. And looking back as I'm preparing for this, probably with some of the onset of some of the things that I had to go through, started from some hyper vigilance, some anxiety issues. Because in probation back in that time, I don't know if your listeners are going to be savvy to this, but we were given, and this will make you laugh, we were given a Palm Pilot. So that was our tech of choice, right? Palm Pilot, we were given a black pen, we were given a 2.5-ounce can of pepper spray, and a caseload of 45 people to go follow up on. We had to use our own cars. So driving to their houses, our own cars, and you just had to deal with it. My second year, we got vests. So we didn't even have bulletproof vests or anything, no weapons. And you just had to be very proficient dealing with people. And so I learned early on that interpersonal relationships, respect, dignity was the only thing that was going to keep me safe going into South Phoenix to worry about these gang guys who some of their stories read like a Stephen King novel. So it was
Communication's everything, man, isn't it?
yeah, it was
Being able to
crazy.
communicate is everything.
So I remember after 9/11 happened. So I'm working in my office. I'm running this caseload, and I see one of the police officers in the city that I'm now employed. He walks in. 9/11 had just happened. Obviously, if you were around then in the business, you remember that was a tough time, and that was a tough time for a lot of people. That, man, you could probably do every one of your episodes by just interviewing 9/11 survivors and dealing with the stuff they deal with, because I know that their whole life is based on the resiliency that came from that or some of the problems that came from that. So I had a chance to interact with these men and women that were coming to do my pickups, right? We'd have people arrested, and of course, we weren't armed. We had to give them to the police department. And I just knew that there was something else. Like I felt I had to do something different. I wanted to contribute in a way that was more substantial than just authoring police reports and going to court and saying, yeah, that guy's going to jail again. So I felt there had to be more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes total sense.
So, and I think that you'll hear throughout the time we talk, and we've talked already about some of this stuff, as you have more and more passion for something and you get more and more engaged, sometimes when you fall harder and deeper because you started off a lot higher. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. The higher up
Yeah.
you go, the harder you'll fall, but the harder you fall, the higher up you go.
Yeah. It's a weird, it's like my buddy calls it the concrete trampoline. You
Mhm.
know, it hurts, but it throws you back up. So I get involved, I get hired in my agency in 2002. And from there, I worked the basic patrol assignments. I worked 3 years neighborhood patrol, and then I was a training officer. Did that for 3 years, and I made investigations. And I worked investigations from end of '07 until 2013 when I got promoted to supervisor. And in that time, I worked property crimes, fraud, forgery a little bit, pawn and metal, which was interesting. I was the only pawn detective for our city, which was, again, it was almost like running a gang caseload. you know. Uh, After that, I went to violent crimes, did a lot of bank robbery stuff, did a lot of the ag assaults, the shootings, and then my last 2.5 years were as a homicide detective.
Wow.
And part of that, and we'll get into some of these things here when it comes to some of the exposure to different things. But you can imagine when my commander comes to me and says, "Look, we have an open homicide. You know, we really feel like you have the right skill set. We want you to take that step." And you know, it feels good when people tell you those things, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
feels great. But I looked at my commander and I said, "Well, that sounds great, sir. I don't want to deal with dead people." And, and he's laughing and saying, "Yeah, okay, well, we'll work through that." So I get promoted in 2013, and I go back to the street. I spent a little bit of time on graveyards, and then almost all of my time was on swing shift. I ran. I was a protester negotiator for a long time from '06 to 14, and then 14 through 2020, I was a supervisor of that unit.
Wow.
So I just finished. Well, I can't tell you that because then you'll know where I work. Um, I finished doing some mega events through that time frame and realized that I needed a change. In that time, I ran our field training program. I was one of the training supervisors for the program. Did that for 4 years, and I just got out of investigations for 2.5 years, where I had the privilege to supervise a unit that I actually started back in 2009. So
Wow.
that was fun. Now I'm back on the street on patrol and loving my life. Being able to leave work and turn my phone off is a new thing. So now I'm looking at over 20 years in my agency, coming up on 24 in May total.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's crazy. And through that time, I've been married. My wife and I have been together 27 and a half years. We've been married 25. We have two teenagers. One's an adult. The other one thinks he's an adult. Uh, so 18 and 15,
Yeah.
and they're doing real well. So
That's awesome,
that's
man.
that's my intro.
No, I love it, man. I love all the different things that you've done. Massive different career. I love talking to people that have done like 20 plus years in law enforcement are still loving it because there's something to be said there. And
Right.
you learn a lot from those officers, especially because it's like, oh, okay, cool. These are the things that they're doing and they've been through the ups and downs. And so I'm
Sure.
real excited. I'm real excited to find out. I know we'll probably run out of time before we go through everything as we always do, but
Mhm.
before we get running on things, I always do like to ask this. What would you say your definition of burnout is? Because obviously there's the Webster Dictionary definition, and everybody kind of has
Mhm.
their own little kind of interpretation of it. What would you say your definition of burnout is?
Well, being somebody like yourself, I'm very disciplined in my schedule. I'm very active in doing as many things as possible to take up my awake time so that when I go to sleep, 30 seconds later, my wife says I'm snoring. So I hit the pillow. I've used all the energy I can use effectively for the day. So burnout for me looks like this, Chris. Burnout for me is when I no longer have the mental, physical, spiritual, or emotional willpower to do the next thing, period. And that can look like a variety of things. But on the far spectrum, and I'm going to push to get this when we work through this evolution. On the far end was last fall, believe it or not. I was in a bout of serious depression based on some things that we'll unpack.
Mm,
And pulling myself through that and out of that was absolutely incredible. It's why I love the job. And you're right, you go peaks and valleys.
mm.
But burnout is, for me, the inability to do that next thing.
So it's almost what I'm hearing is almost, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. It's almost beyond that that trough beyond dropping down below, or like, we have these ups and downs, but dropping below that down where it's like, no, I'm just no more. I'm done. I'm checking out. See you later.
Yeah, and that's a real thing because a lot of times, having done the job, you can have a bad day, you can have a bad couple of days, but you always, especially as a supervisor, I've been a supervisor for 10 years. I look at, all right, well, next week will be better, or I can always look ahead. But when burnout came, and it's happened twice in my career, when the burnout came, I wasn't even looking forward to anything at all. In fact, last
Yeah.
fall, I would get to work and I'd look at the back door of my building and my stomach would get upset and I'd get a headache. I remember calling my wife at 6:30 in the morning saying, something's wrong with me. I am I'm hating my whole world. That's not a trough, right? That's a canyon.
Oh, yeah, that's well beyond. You're stuck in the mud at the bottom of the canyon.
Yeah.
So okay, so you said twice you've been through burnout. Tell us about the first time.
Well, to do that effectively, I'm going to take a long route, okay?
Okay,
But it won't
cool.
be too long. You can grab me anytime you want. It's your deal, brother. But I want to talk about something that I think is super important, right? So, anytime anyone is a first responder, and it could look like police, fire, it could look like medical, and we don't want to discount that. Um, Anytime you mix what we do with family, right? I, I'm not a guy who would play into the idea, Chris, that oh, you keep your personal life separate and your professional life separate. You can't do that. We're not built
Mm-mm.
to do that because if I have a fight with my wife or my kid get hurt, right, then I go to work. I'm still thinking about it, and it's going to impact the decisions, the communication style, the relationships I go through
How you
my whole
react,
shift.
how you
How you
react to
react,
it.
if I
Yeah,
desire to be proactive,
yeah.
all of that. So I want to touch on something up front. In 2005, my son was born, my first son, January 3rd, 2005. It was beautiful, right? And so I'm a first time dad, 30, you know. So, and I'm at the prime, man. I'm loving it. I was field training officer. I had the Zach Morris bleach blonde hair, which is probably why I'm losing hair now, you know. And
Yeah.
it was a good time. I was training a lot of people. I was a hard charger. I've been teaching defensive tactics for a long time. So I was in that world. Well, 6 months after my son was born, I get dispatched to a 6 months old drowning. Okay. And I know that you can relate to where I'm going with this,
I
right?
know where this is. I know where this is going. Yep.
And so fast forward years later, I teach, I'm a Franklin Covey nobility instructor and a Blue Courage instructor. And I can tell people I do in the training, I tell them all the time, I can remember where my hands were and how the dead baby skin felt on my hands. And when I mean dead, we need to talk about serious things in this, right? So
Oh.
the baby was blue. I mean, actual blue. And I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do, right?
Mhm.
And luckily, fire comes right behind me. They grab the kid, and they never pronounce on scene. So they just take off. They go to the hospital. Somebody else came. I wasn't there very long, but I remember calling my boss and I said, hey, boss, I need a minute. Like, I got to go see my kid. I got to go see him breathing. So I haul in our old Bubble Light Crown Vics, right? And I'm racing across town. And what's the one thing they tell you when you have an infant who's sleeping? Never wake a sleeping baby,
Yeah.
right? So I come ripping in. My wife's like, "What's going on?" And I run over to my kid. I rip him out of his little baby burrito that he's wrapped up in, and he's screaming, and I'm kissing on him, and I'm crying, and
And your wife's going, "What the hell's going on?"
she doesn't know what's going on, man. And she's just kind of like, something's up, but it overwhelmed her too. But that's
Mm,
that vicarious trauma that goes into her that plays in a
yeah.
marriage. What I should have done is I should have stayed home and just processed that, but at the time, we weren't talking about things that you and I are talking about today. We weren't
Yeah.
in '05. We weren't talking about why mental health is a big deal and why it's okay to say, look, I'm not okay with what I just saw because after the 20-year career, we're exposed to about 185 critical incidents compared to most people's two.
Yeah, it's 18. What is it? 18 times as much trauma in the first 12 months as a civilian will see in their entire life.
Yeah. And so we weren't talking about that then.
No.
So you know what I did? I got them all fired up, woke them up, and handed them over to my wife and went back to work.
Anyway, I want to real quick. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you here for a second
Sure.
because this hits on a really important thing that I teach a lot. What was it inside of you that told you so that how many years had you been in at this point?
I had, well, as a police officer, I had three.
3 years.
Yeah, three
Okay,
at
cool.
that point.
So 3 years in, you're still this gung ho police officer.
Mhm.
You're 30 years old, so you have a little bit of life experience on your side, which is probably a benefit. But
Right.
you managed to have enough awareness. Why do you think you had enough awareness, or even had the balls? I'm going to say it as a 3-year cop and as young person. Why do you think you had enough balls and gumption and awareness to go, Sarge, I need to go and see my son. I need to take a moment for myself. Why do you think you had enough to do that? What was it that you think drove you to be able to go, yeah, I do that, instead of just powering through like we see so many cops do?
Well, I'm the oldest of four boys. My dad was always raising us like, look, you take advantage of every opportunity you get. You're going to work hard, just outwork everyone, and you'll be okay, kind of thing. So I was instilled early on with a good sense of identity of who I was, at least
Mm,
who I was going to make myself to be. And as a Gen Xer, it's kind of like, just deal with it. You just deal with your issues. But the problem was, it gets to a point where, I'm smart enough at this point. I've been married 7 years, right? And so at some point you realize I'm not okay. And I was okay saying to people, I'm not okay.
right.
And I just recognized, because of some of the other issues which will come up, um, when I started, I believed that if I was just really violent, if I won every fight, I picked a fight with everybody and won, then I'd gain respect. But the problem is, it just went opposite, right? So I kind of like had set my chops early on with, what are you going to do to me? I'm just going to beat you down if something happens, right? And so I just took the attitude with my boss. I'm like, look, I got to go and see my kid. You have to let me, because
Yeah.
frankly, that was just a courtesy call to him. I was already moving that way, right?
Yeah, gotcha, gotcha. What made you realize that you needed to go see your son, do you reckon?
Well, I tell you what, first time dad and
Yeah.
dealing with everything you deal with. I mean, you see dead people, but to see a dead baby and recognize, wait a minute, I'm here right now, and there's 9,000 ways in the next hour my baby can die,
Yeah.
that I have trumped up in my own mind, right? Because of all the stuff we see. And even at
Mm,
3 years, you still see, as a cop
a
working south
lot.
side of my district, you see a lot, right? And so I just wanted to put eyes on something that was pure and good and loving, because it was nothing but trauma and pain and sadness. And that's a lot, man. And it was mid shift. So I knew I had like another 6 hours or so to go. I wasn't going to be okay living in this pit and stuck in the mud of the canyon. I needed to do something different. I just want to see my kid.
Well, it's great. It's great that even all that time ago, you had that awareness, which probably believes that, like, is probably why you're still a police officer.
Oh,
27
yeah.
years later, 24 years later.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So, sorry for an interruption, but had to go down that. So you
No, that's
you you go
golden.
to this incident. The original one was, tell us about the first time that you feel like you're really burned out. And you're telling us about having to interact with this and go see your son. I'll
Right.
let you carry it on.
So that was actually, to your point earlier, that was a trough, right? That wouldn't have been
Mm,
the canyon that stopped me, because I went back to work. Other trauma issues come into play. So I'm exposed to fatal car wrecks, giving death notifications. No one ever really trained you about going to somebody. And I remember this, my second year, having to go to a woman. I don't speak great Spanish, but I was the only one they had on graves that was even remotely close. And so I'm in broken Spanish telling a mom that all three of her children were killed in a car wreck. And because I don't speak the language very well, I didn't have the empathy that the words were trying to convey. And I even had another officer with me who was just there physically for me, I think.
yeah.
And when so essentially I told this woman, I'm sorry, your kids are dead.
Yeah.
Here's where they are. Here's a card. Call these people. And she just looked at me, and I'll never forget how hollow I felt, right? So
Mm.
there's that. As you move on in your career, crisis counseling, I would have been somebody people could trust because I didn't run my mouth. And so being older and being married and being the guy with kids who's a cop, you're the grandpa with wisdom, right? And so the cops, I internalized their issues. I've been shot at. I had people tried to disarm me from 2003 to 2007, 9 separate times.
Wow.
So stuff like that happens, and they weren't successful. But part of that too, unfortunately, is that I end up winning those conflicts due to extreme violence, and then have to apologize to the people in the hospital later for what they made me do. But you start recognizing in yourself that there's a crust that's building up, right? There's a
Mm.
crust. So this is moving us into, so all this stuff's building up. So then I had homicide in 2000, end of 2011 to about 2013. From there, looking back, one of our officers was killed in line of duty in '07. Another one, and he was a close friend of mine. In fact, we were on the phone for 4 hours the night before he was killed. And he's asking me, hey, should I break with my girlfriend or should I marry her? Right. So we had a lot of ground to cover on that.
Yeah.
Just a solid young man, solid young man. Second guy, this guy's wife used to cut my hair, and she's asking, saying, hey, this other agency's giving him the runaround. Can you introduce him? I was heavily involved in the union at the time. So just connections, right? So I took
Yeah.
him under my wing, introduced him. 18 months later, I'm in homicide. I get a call 8 o'clock at night from my boss who says, hey, this officer was killed on a duty. You need to respond. Now, there were 6 of us. And so all 6 people respond to every homicide because we needed them. And that's just tough, you know. And then you had another officer. She took her own life in 2015. And so you start looking at these things, and I ended up, after my buddy who I had to process his scene, when I worked my friend's murder, I remember that was at the end of 2011. Uh, I was in a bad spot because all I saw all the time was the negative effects. So my
Mm.
first burnout came there. I had stopped working out. I stopped caring about being involved in things. It was noticeable enough that people all around the department, because I was normally happy-go-lucky, I started resigning from committees, and just I started doing what you've seen over you doing this. I started pulling away, right? I started detaching from things that were healthy and positive and letting my own self-talk dwell on the negative, dwell on, well, it's hopeless anyway. Like no one cares. The same guy that I arrest was out of jail before my report was done. So why does it
Yeah.
matter what I do?
Yeah.
And that all was compounded in that time. And at that point, my second son was born in '08. And so, I got young kids, and that's a frenetic life to lead. And then you swings, it just being a detective and coming home, kids are happy to see you. And at the time we had pagers, tells you how long ago that was, right? And your pager would go off. I walk in, pager goes off. My wife just looked at me, shook her head. So she's not mad at me, but I'm seeing disappointment. I'm seeing disbelief. I'm seeing, I can't believe you're leaving us again. She
Yeah.
never said that. And to her credit, she was always very supportive.
But you're
But her
projecting,
nonverbals,
you're projecting a lot of your own stuff on
correct.
that, all that negativity of, oh my God, I'm not good enough. I can't actually process these. I can't get these guys held away. I can't, all the negativity then goes
Right.
from you. And instantly, as soon as she just shakes her head and goes, and in her head, you don't know what she was going through, but she could have just been going, it's just another day. Cool, sweet,
Right.
carry on. And
Yeah.
we'll see you later. Be safe. And you're sitting there going, oh my God, she feels so bad. She's disappointed in me. I'm leaving my family again. I'm abandoning my kids again. And all these, because again, yeah, like you said, being in that negative mindset.
So that was real, that was tough. And so that was also, to kind of wrap up that first time, that in 2008, I'd hurt my shoulder. I needed labrum surgery, which sidelines you for a bit.
Yeah.
In 2012, I'd actually gotten some serious injury. The disc between C6 and 7 popped out. So I had to have spinal surgery in 2012. So that was as it was in homicide. And so all that's, I realized, I'm like, okay, so I'm not 20. I'm breaking. Am I going to have a chance to have a 20-year career? I have all my eggs in one basket. My wife was a stay-at-home mom. So if I don't work, we don't eat, kind of thing. Like I have to work and get this handled. And
There's
now I
that
can't figure a
stress.
way to get success. I can't get success. And that was really tough.
Tell me a little bit. Actually, I'm curious on that one because cops being A-type personality that we are, and there's nothing wrong with it. We always strive for that success. We always strive for that. We have to be the biggest. We have to be the baddest. We have to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
What was your uh, definition of success?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because that has been something I've been dealing with my whole life, and I've been able to find some victory in it recently, and I would say the past couple of years. But success to me was always be the guy in the room that always had the answer for everybody's problems all the time. And recognizing, of course, that I'm not a big guy, so I recognize, look, I gotta have some wisdom. I can't be picking a fight with everyone because I'm gonna get thrashed, and I don't want to be handled by everybody. And I'm not gonna smooth talk everyone in court. Like I recognize there are boundaries in the way that I would handle my life, but finding success was if someone had a question about the job or the law or search and seizure or report writing or arrest tactics, I was the man. You had a union question. At one point, I was union president. Okay, so I wanted to be that guy all the time for everything. And that's a house of cards, right? You're just building a balsa car to drive in because
Well,
it just breaks.
it's it's actually running from the real truth of what success really is for you,
Yeah,
because it's not really knowing. So it's like, oh, I'll just have the answer for everything, and then I'll look successful.
right. And
Uh,
that false face is dangerous because it
it's
masks the
draining,
real issue.
and it's draining as hell. Okay, so you went through burnout. Then when did you recognize that you were actually burned out
I
that
would say
first time?
probably right as I got promoted in 2013. So I go back to the street, and when I went to the street, I was so excited, but no one knew who I was, and that was a hard thing to deal with because a lot of these young guys had come on in the 6.5 years I'm in investigations. So
Hmm.
I come back on the street, I go to my first squad, which is of course a bunch of newbies,
Mm.
and I'm excited to talk to them about blood spatter analysis and how to string a bullet hole to tell you the height of the suspect and where he's fired from. And the kid in the seat says, "How do I do my timesheet?" And I went, "Okay." And I look back and the simplicity of having your day end at the end of the day and starting a new set of issues, that I look back, I go, man, I can't believe I had just gone through that. And being back on patrol and the simplicity of relationship building with people, which is my wheelhouse, that got me psyched up again, man. I started engaging 2014 and 15. I was invited to some leadership schools, and that reset a lot of stuff for me.
Was that just that it just happened to happen, or was it a thing that you kind of were like, okay, you identified that you're burning out, that you identified, oh my God, I'm in this I'm in this rut, this
Yeah.
canyon. I need to do something different, or was it just kind of happened to happen because of change of environment?
Well, I think change of environment, to your point, is critical in that. But I remember telling my wife I tested for supervisor 4 times, and this fourth time, I told her, I go, well, I guess I'll just be a homicide detective forever.
Mm.
Which is interesting because most people in the department, they would, pardon the pun, they would kill for that opportunity, right? They would want to be one of the top tier detectives dealing with things. Any training you wanted in homicide, you'd get. They'd fly us to different states to deal cases because that it's a serious thing, right? But looking back, the environment, the Lord knew what He was doing and put me in a different position to get my mind right again, to be able to have a rear view mirror that wasn't as clouded as it used to be, and to see the rear view, but to see the path in front of me is more secure now. And you have wisdom, right? You go through these experiences, you get scars. The scars remind you of some of these areas. Hey, I got to avoid that. And so it just built in my mind. All right, so what? And this is where I want to move next. What do you do with that? So what do I do with the learned scars? How do I process that into a paradigm that helps me stay healthy, right?
Yep,
Isn't that
yep.
your whole thing?
That's the whole thing. What did you learn from it? I was going to ask you, what did you learn from that? I was actually going to ask you to tell me about the second time and what
Sure.
yeah, tell me about the second time and then we'll come back to the learnings.
All right. So uh okay, the second time happens last year. So it's probably in the first part of 2022. But the lead in for that, believe it or not, was 2015. And I'm not going to go through every single year, but I went through adrenal fatigue. I didn't know that was even a thing. I had no idea about how cortisol worked and how, DHEA and oxytocin and serotonin. I had no idea. You know why? Because there was a bad guy, you should get him. And if he resists you, you should beat him into the ground, kind of thing. But I'm here, I am 40 years old, and I'm falling asleep at 1 in the afternoon. I mean, exhausted. I had no idea why. And eventually, doing some good stuff, getting my blood checked because, of course, you're a cop, you're invincible. So
Yeah.
why have a physical? Why get your blood checked? Why check cortisol? And the doc like looks at me and says, "You have no vitamin D in your whole body. Your cortisol's through the roof, and your adrenal gland is like stuck at 9,000 RPMs." So over the course of a year, I had to turn my adrenal gland off, learn how to, build it back up with supplements again and be healthy, and then start realizing, okay, what's going on? Well, the job doesn't change, right? Your perception of the job changes. It got worse. As you remember, our country goes through a whole lot in 2020. 2019 really is when it started. Uh, so I get myself in a situation where I'm in investigations. Now, Chris, we're back to the lifestyle of 2 a.m. Now I'm the sergeant. So
Yeah.
2 a.m., all my guys are calling me for everything. Like they may have one call out, but I have 6 or 7 because I had 7 guys. Random officers that I'd spent, a couple decades building relationships with would call me at 2 in the morning. Not to, officers, and I would give them that, right?
Yeah.
Because they had a question, and I remember my pride sin of I got to be the guy.
Answer every question.
Pride. There you go. Okay, yeah. You know what? Call me 2 a.m., bro. I know I get up at 4, but I only need 3 hours of sleep. So it started getting bad, right? Started getting the symptoms, the PTSD related issues, the hypervigilance, the solution irritability. When you don't come up with a solution as fast as I do or my exact way, man, I would lose my mind on you. And then I'd make it my mission to destroy you. The physical symptoms, the do it now syndrome,
Yep.
right? You come home with your wife, hey, can you take the trash out? Do it now. And she'd look at me going, you get I'm not a suspect, right? And she had that early on. And so she recognized I was coming. She goes, I don't think so, Val. You're not doing that to me again. So
Yeah.
I'm jumping through a bunch of different things here that I want to move back on eventually. But so I get to a point where there was a series of issues related to perceptions that led to an investigation. And I had plenty of investigations in my career because you're not going to be a cop and not be under investigation. So if you're listening and you're a new cop, you get, I don't know whatever your agency does it, but you get your folder, whatever, saying you're under investigation. It's normal. That's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Right?
It's nothing
Provided that
against you. They're not targeting you. It's just, it
Correct.
happens. They have to do it.
And own up to it. Whatever you
Yeah.
do, own up to it. Well, this is one of those situations where my entire chain of command was like, this isn't right. And, you know, being raised the way I was always to work hard. Your work will speak for you. And now here I am out working, outperforming, redesigning things and we were runner up for squad of the year in 2020, my first year in. And all of a sudden now I'm under an investigation for what certainly appeared to be inequitable, right? For inequitable reason. And I couldn't, here's the thing too, mentally, if I could have justified in my mind, yeah, I can see a path of travel for why this makes sense, I probably would have been able to come around emotionally to that. But when the dissonance occurs where I can't see why that's equitable, oh man, it was hard. Now I'm approaching my 20 years, right? I'm like, piss on this place. I don't care. And this is when I was going in, hitting the back door and going, I'm getting a stomach ache. I'm getting a headache just coming to work. You know, I didn't even care. I remember I hit my 20. The next day, I drove down in anger to retire at City Hall. And I called my wife. I'm like, hey, I'm quitting, which is a crazy thing to say because I'm a big advocate.
The pendulum swung. The pendulum went from
Absolutely.
loving it to, oh my God. And we'll talk about the catalyst to that because I'm sure you know about it or are aware of it. And if not, we'll find it. But the pendulum swung back over there. It's like, okay, I'm done. This is like, no, last straw. I'm out of here. This is, and then, yeah, carry on.
So I make it about halfway down, right? My wife is begging me. She's like, we don't have health insurance, man. So nothing else. Maybe you should think about getting another job before you quit right now. So got some sense knocked into me a little bit, went back in, took a breather.
Strong woman, very strong woman.
She's amazing. I have the privilege to be married to the best woman that the Lord's ever made. And no offense.
I'll fight you on that one.
Yeah, see, good. And that's the kind of response a married man should have. So it was challenging, right? But I took a week off. My boss calls me and says, just take as much time off as you need. You're not the person that you used to be. And that scares me more than the production loss and all. Even my detective was like, hey, boss, we have a lot of respect for you. We just want to tell you this, you're not right. And so
that's something I want. First off, real quick, I want to praise those guys because for them to actually say that and say it to you and say it to your face is massive. You don't see that in many departments. You don't see that in many squads. You don't see that very often. So for your team and for your boss to say that and be like, take as much time off as you need because I know that something's going on. I don't know what it is. And I'm glad that you didn't take it in a thing of their palm. Like I didn't have that happen, but I had somebody send me to somebody and it was like, I felt like I was being palmed off to somebody else that they couldn't deal with it because I went to them. But it's so great that you had that support around you to help you get to where you are now, obviously.
Sure. And that's, to your point, when you focus on people as being more important than the tasks that you ask of them, right? That's my shtick is people relationships are always more important than the badge that they wear, care about the lives of people. But I mean, you got to remember part of this ongoing phone calls in the middle of the night, like I knew everybody's spouse by first name. I'd called their spouse and said, if you guys, here's my spouse's name. If you had anything, call. I knew their kids. I knew their events. I mean, I wanted to be someone that they could trust, and you can't build trust without transparency and vulnerability and loyalty. And so you're right, for them to say that was a big deal. And it gave me a little time off.
And as you've just said, I just want to bring a point to this as well for listeners and viewers, and that as you just said, it's a double-edged sword. I'll bring some direct to this. You would get what you know what part of what caused you to get burned out this last time was that you were, and even the first time, you were on call all the time,
Right.
constantly hyper vigilant, constantly had this thing of when's the pager going to go off next, or the cell phone going to go off next, had
Right.
all this going on subconsciously draining your adrenals. But at the same time, because you were that person, because you were that person that was like, call me anytime, I'm here, you can get a hold of me. And you were that person that wanted to answer those questions,
Hmm.
wanted to, strive to be the person that could always answer the question. You knew the families, you knew the people, they knew you. So when you
Hmm.
were in a downfall, they knew that something wasn't right. They could identify.
Sure.
They weren't like, oh fuck, all of a sudden Jeff's such an asshole, isn't he? What the
Yeah.
hell? Like this, and
Yeah.
just talking about it behind your back, which then would have subconsciously done even more to you. So
Oh yeah.
again, it's such a great thing to have awareness of, that your strengths are also your weaknesses. But if you can sit there and figure out the two of them, then you can start to balance them a little bit more, so that
Hmm.
then you can actually go, hey, wait a second. Okay, no, I know that I don't put boundaries in, and I know that I always have to ask questions. I have to be able to answer the question. Okay, cool. How do I work on that so that I can keep the positive sides, but reduce the negative side?
Yeah. And that's critical. And walking that tightrope becomes a challenge until you realize it's not a tightrope. When I finally to hopefully you want to know about what drew me out of this, right?
I do. I was going to ask you the next. What do you think helped you get? What got you out of the first time, the
Hmm.
biggest, and then how did that impact preventing you from hitting as hard the second time?
Yeah, and so that was where I was going to go to. Is that the first time it was realizing that the tightrope of expectations managed from personal to professional was that was a not a real thing. What I needed to recognize was there was a chasm between my work life and my personal life, and that's okay, right? That
There's
was
no such
okay.
this balance, work-life balance is a bunch of BS. There is no work-life balance. There is a giving here a little bit, taking from the family side, giving to the work, taking from the work, giving to the family, and having that mold, that pathway along the whole way, which I'm pretty sure is where you're going at with that.
Yeah, and so you're right. So I was able to see that obviously change of scenery always helps. And I would recommend to any of your viewers, listeners, that every 5 years or so in my career, I did something different,
Yeah.
some completely different assignment. I had other assignments, trainings, and so those are all very healthy to keep your mind interested in other things, so you don't just spin out and in the same career. I
The
got some guys
variety.
supervised now. I supervise a senior squad. I got a guy who was 21 years on patrol. That's all I ever
Yeah.
wanted to do. And he is exactly what you would think a 21-year veteran patrol guy would be.
Mm.
You know, you could crash a jet in front of him and he'd ask you what you want for breakfast. It, nothing phases this guy, but the level of his emotional highs is not very high. So his emotional lows, again, they don't
Right,
rebound
right.
very low.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, so I create this paradigm. I see the difference. I start seeing that as I engage more, which is counterintuitive for me. Well, I didn't tell you at this time I was getting my master's degree from 2017 to 2019 and teaching in the community college. So I'm doing, raising two boys, working full time, teaching undergrad in person and online. And I was teaching 5 book studies through my church while getting my master's. My wife, bless her heart, and again, we'll fight about the award of Wife of the Year. She actually tells me, and she tells the story to people. We talk to a lot of law enforcement people about this exact scenario. She stands on the stairs. I got my little ear pods in, and I'm just typing every Monday, typing your paper for your master's. And she gets my attention and she says, "You're hurting our family." Not emotional, because my wife's very emotional about this. She says, "You're hurting our family. You're hurting our boys. You're hurting our marriage. You're giving all of the best of you to other people and not to us. And I just want you to think about that." Bro, she literally turned and walked away. And it wasn't like I was mad. I was
The funny,
shocked.
the funniest thing is what you would probably reacted completely different. She stood there.
Oh yeah, no, because I would have found the need to build a wall and defend,
Yep,
right?
there would have been the
Justify,
defense, but you
rationalize
had no option to defend yourself. Yeah,
to
that's
thin
a
air.
strong woman, man.
Again, Wife of the Year, I'm telling you. So I get on the phone with all these guys who I'm mentoring and counseling and talking to, and I say, I got to stop meeting with you. And to a person, Chris, would you know what they said? They said, "Jeff, we're so glad you're telling us this. We just didn't know how to tell you to stop because you have such a magnanimous personality. And we love being with you, but we could
Yeah,
see it's killing you." And that changed everything. That was probably 2017. And
Wow.
so that, I mean, I'd gone through the 2013 time pretty quickly by change of scenery and developing healthy routines, like leaving my uniform, my radio at the office,
Yeah.
people clothes going home except for my off-duty gun. And never the two shall mix kind of thing. That was healthy. Overwhelming my schedule again and being a slave to the tyranny of the urgent, right?
Yeah.
That became a problem until my wife dialed me up in 2018.
Yeah.
And then when I crashed a little bit last fall, it was only for about 2 weeks.
Yeah. It's amazing
And
how
so,
they
and
get
she
shorter
reminded
and
me too,
shorter. They
bro.
get shorter and shorter,
Yeah,
right?
that's the goal. I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm not ever saying that. I'm just saying I know my strategies now. I know that my faith, my belief as a Christian and my Savior, exercising, I write, I read, the power of saying yes a lot versus saying no a little at home. Like save the no for the things you have to say no to. Don't do
Yeah.
drugs. Don't drink and drive. Right? Your kid wants to stay out 20 extra minutes. Just relax, right?
Yeah,
But you don't
yeah,
see some of that when they're young because you're just in crisis management. Discipline, balance, man. I tell you that changed a lot. That changed a lot, and there were some
yeah.
positive things. I know you want to say something.
I want to jump into that discipline and balance because you've just dropped a whole bunch of really good tools. You know, for you, it's Christianity. For it's those no's, making sure that the no's are saved for the big things.
Right.
And then there was a third one. Oh, I missed it. It's to
Well, the power of saying yes versus saying no.
Power of
Reading,
saying yes
writing,
versus yeah, reading and
exercise.
writing. That was the one. Reading, writing, and then exercise. You know, exercise is a proven thing. If you follow me on social media at all, you see I'm a fitness crazy person. I just went for a 10. I got here still tired. Went for a 10K run in like
Right.
45-degree weather. You know, just, yeah, do crazy stuff, and then did like 4 sets of push-ups afterwards. Just because fitness is that thing. It balances your brain. I wanted to So the jumping into the oh, my brain's just lost it. Still probably tired. The discipline and that on
Mm-hmm.
things. What is it that you feel is for boundaries and discipline on all that work life, kind of leaving work at work and life and then taking life home? What do you feel is the singular best thing for officers to do in that? Because I know that is a big drainer for cops. Is that saying no to work, the putting boundaries to work, the
Right.
discipline of leaving work at work, leaving your work phone at work.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Because I know you went through stuff again. It shortened down to only about 2 weeks, and you caught yourself. It hit pretty hard, but it was a short 2 weeks instead of it
Correct.
peeling out. What is it that people, even yourself moving forward, can do so you don't ever get back to that stage? Because that's how you eliminate burnout: is you identify what causes you to get there, and you identify the positive things to stop you from getting there. What do you feel for you, and even for those new cops, or the people that maybe you talking to yourself 20 odd years ago? What
Yeah.
was something that you would teach them that would be like, do this and you will stop that burnout? You won't get to that nasty trough down below and go beyond into the canyon.
Mm. Awesome question. And you know what, man? If I had the absolute correct answer, then me and you we switching spots, and I'd be running an awesome podcast, telling people how to take care of themselves better. And I have a lot of respect for you for doing this, but I just want to tell you. But I will say that a key strategy that I saw that I would tell myself that I have been telling other people that I self-talk myself now with is community. And see, cops don't want to talk about this. They
Yeah.
don't want to talk about this. But as a supervisor, I think I'm like the third or fourth ranked supervisor in my department right now for tenure. But you have to listen to me. I'm your boss now. So if nothing else in briefing, what you're going to hear is this, Chris. You're going to hear, look, you can say you're type A all day long. You can show them all your badges. I mean, I was part of squads, meritorious unit squad award winner 5 times, 2 life-saving awards. We can resume all day long, but it's all a bunch of crap because you know what? They're medals on a wall. Lives that are changed not in isolation, not as a type A guy, but as a guy who says, I'm a guy and I need people. So the strategy for success for me, and I would encourage your listeners and viewers to think through this, new or old, you have to have authentic communication, transparency. You gotta have people like my wife, my buddies at church, some of the cops I know that are willing to, like my old squad, they're willing to tune you up and go, no, you're full of crap, man. You're full of crap. Or You know what, Jeff? Dude, keep on that. I mean, even my kids now, my adult son is like, hey, the guy you were, like when I was preaching at church, he's like, the guy you were up there, that's a good guy. Be that guy.
Mm.
And have people be willing to have the courage, right? To be able to tell you things. It only happens if you're willing to invest in them, not overboard, as we talked about. That was the failure point for me. I wanted to be everything to everybody. But you have to, if you're going to draw from that emotional bank account, you better put something in there to draw from. So relationships matter. But I tell my friends now, look, I'm available until 8 o'clock at night. At 8 o'clock at night, my phone gets turned off. And I literally turn every phone I have off. I didn't even know a phone had an off button until about a year ago. That's the coolest thing ever, man. I was like, this is great. But be able to tell people, and because they respect that boundary, and because they know that my relationship with them is not based on a bunch of thumbs up likes or a bunch of comments in a box, they know it's based on relationship and loyalty, then they know that they don't have to talk for a couple of days. They realize, hey, just checking in, make sure you're safe. And my wife, like I said, 27 years being married to a cop, she's legit strong, man. She got her master's. I mean, she's a smart lady. She homeschooled our kids. I mean, she's legit. And if I need to be told truth, she'll tune me up. So it's communities is the short answer. Get rid of your bogus, I'm the toughest dude in the room. Find the biggest dude in the playground, knock him down. You can do that all day long. You'll still be crying at night on your pillow alone because your heart will be hurting because you haven't allowed anything but bad stuff to fill it, bro.
Yeah.
Like you can't live like that. That's how, I mean, like I said, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I got 6 years sober in January.
Congratulations, man.
Thanks, man. But those are the things, like that was how I was dealing with it. I'd work a lot of hours. My dad's a recovering alcoholic. I watched that pattern, work a lot of hours, provide for your family, show them you love them, and drink your butt off. I wouldn't go out. I would drink at home and, play video games or whatever, right? But that's all that unhealthy stuff just masked the pain that I was feeling because I didn't have authentic relationships.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm kind of in a hamster wheel here, but that's the short answer is community and relationship.
No, I love that, man. The community and relationship, and you touched on communication there. We can have communities, we can have relationships, but if we're not communicating and we're not communication, I want to reiterate this because a lot of people say communication. Even I talk about comms a lot as part of your state. Communication also is a two-way street. You have to be willing to listen as well and not take it to heart. Not take somebody coming to you and going, boss, something's not right. What's going on? As an attack. If you're taking that as an attack, that's not communicating. That's still being that A-type, I'm going to take down the biggest person in the yard.
Yeah. Right.
When you actually take it and you go and you reflect on what's said, and then you actually respond with actually, no, I don't feel that's true. Again, I don't feel because you don't actually know. I don't feel that's true because of X, Y, and Z. Do you see something different?
So let me push back on one thing you said.
Yeah, go for it.
Because you had said don't take it to heart. I would challenge that. I'd say absolutely take it to heart. But don't be right because
take it to heart, but take it to heart in a way of challenging yourself.
Yeah, be humble.
Yeah,
be real communication. Right, be an active listener. If you don't understand something, well, when you say this, how do you come to that conclusion? What do you mean when you say that I'm really aggressive? What I think it's this. What do you think? And like you said, Chris, be willing to listen to other people who are seeing your life without your bias.
Yeah, without your rose-tinted goggles on, man.
Yeah, man. Everybody is at the worst place their whole life that they're ever going to be at probably right now. If you think of that, you have a lot more empathy for your conversation with your fellow man.
Especially as a police officer. And I'm not a cop anymore, but as a cop, anybody who's a cop or ex-cop, you are some of the best communicators out there. You literally have to you have to walk into a scene and know nothing and interpret it without bias as best you can. You have to get in all the information from both sides of the party, then look at what actually happened, all of it. But we're really fucking terrible at doing it to ourselves.
Yeah, we're our hardest critics. Our own voice is the hardest critic we got, brother.
So if we took some of that learning that we know from the job, applied it to ourselves, like we were just talking about with communicating and having community around us, so that because the more people that you have around you, the more you think about the scenes that we have 50 people that all saw the same fist fight. Yeah. You now have 50 different perspectives on it that you can different. And you can
Yes.
actually get so much more evidence. You can actually picture out and process the scene so much more and create that big picture. Whereas when you have one person or two people, that's all this. You get it from one side, or you get it from one perspective. You really don't get that many different perspectives.
Hmm.
And so if when one person says to you, "Oh, you're doing this," you can now, if you have a community around you, you can go to all of them and go, "This is why the podcast is here. I don't
Correct.
think I know everything. I've interviewed over 140 different people, 150 different people, I think, at the time of this episode.
Hmm.
And that's just on camera. Then there's all the other people that I talk to
Sure. Yeah.
going, okay, cool. What is it that you do to fight burnout? There's a lot of commonalities, but then there's a lot of different
Yeah.
things that I pick up that are different. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, because different perspectives on how
Hmm.
to counter and fight burnout, how to eliminate it. And comes down again, same thing as a police officer. If you want to be the best cop you can be, I love the community side that you said on it, because
Yeah.
it is the community, the communication. I talk about your physiology, your how you the language that you actually use. Again, talking with more people, having more people around, you're going to have it. They're taking
Right.
care of yourself. So Jeff, I'm going to kind of jump topics a little bit here.
Okay.
I love that. I'm a why guy. I believe that the number one tip to knowing yourself is knowing your true internal why. And
Hmm.
this is a why, and I talk about it in almost every episode. This is the why that was stemmed or planted when you were a child normally. And it's kind of been there and been watered and fed and sometimes ripped on and destroyed, and you kind of get disheartened with it, but it's
Hmm.
always there and it's what drives you. What would you say your why is, before I tell you mine, which you've probably heard by listening to other episodes? But
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that because I'm a big mission statement guy as a Covey guy. I'm a Seven Habits instructor.
yeah,
So Seven Habits Law Enforcement, we walk people into developing their own mission statement, which, as you know, most people haven't ever thought of something like that. Your whole life you spend reacting to stimulus versus why don't I take advantage of being proactive in my life and writing a purpose statement for the things I believe, like you said, that were probably there from a child that were watered and
what
grew.
I've found every single one of them is
Yeah.
doing it with
So
over
my
600
my
people.
why
It's there.
my why is anchored in my desire to serve people and be a protector. And
Yeah.
so it morphs into where I wrote this when I was 40 years old. I wrote it, it's framed and hanging in the main part of my house so that anybody that comes over sees it. And I tell them, you come in, you see it, you have to hold me accountable to that. You have the right to ask me if you see me out of line. That's what I said I'm about. So either I stop saying it or I change it,
Yeah.
you know? And so my why looks like this. My mission statement is to serve Jesus Christ with all my heart, mind, and soul, to hold my wife's hand and lead my family well, to serve anybody, anytime, any place, anywhere that has a need that I can physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially meet at that time. So there's my boundaries.
Yeah.
And then to hold my head high, knowing that I have a noble desire to represent myself, my family, my faith, and my career.
I love how
That's
the last line of that statement starts with yourself.
mhm.
So many people that I see that write mission statements or write purpose statements, or there's a bunch of different people that out there that do it, and we all do it different ways. Uh, of course, I think mine's the best, but
Eh, it's a
um,
good mission for you.
it's a good mission. But if you don't start with yourself, towards yourself first,
Mhm.
you're instantly draining yourself.
I
And
agree. How can you give somebody something that's empty?
exactly. And if you're giving it to them, if you're giving it to everybody else first, then you don't, then to yourself, you're always going to feel like I call it serving everybody else first. You're serving the
Sure.
job first. A lot of law
Right.
enforcement, they run my pyramid that I call it starts with self, then it's relationship, your intimate other, then kids, then family like relationship, and then it's work and everybody else. Most people run it upside down.
Yes, you're correct.
And that self
That's why most
side.
cops get married 2 or 3 times.
Yep, because they're giving to that other person and feeling like, oh, this person just taking from me all the time, and that's why the marriages fall over, and they go, oh, that person just did this and they just did that. It's like, well, no, what did you do about it? What were you doing for
Correct.
yourself as well? So no,
Mhm.
I love that mission statement, man. That is amazing. As we kind of get to wrapping up, I know that you do some stuff for people, and you do offer some different services in that. Tell us a little bit about those, so that people can get in touch with you.
Great.
Should they want to.
I appreciate that because what has been a resurgence in my life has been At the first part of this year, I was able to connect with some influential people, and I wrote a couple articles and got published in Law Officer magazine, which led into the creation of Substack, which is just a portal, if you're aware, a portal for writers and authors to publish their work. So I will tell you that there's a bunch of different ways to contact me. I've developed this idea of courageous nobility. So Dr. Travis Yates with Law Officer Magazine's editor-in-chief law officer, he also runs a courageous leadership training. We're working on the Courageous Principles Leadership Alliance for people to join up. And I would tell you originally up front, so that's Courageous Principles Leadership CPL Alliance.org. So it's cplalliance.org. My Substack, Courageous Nobility with Jeff Daukas, is Jeff Daukas, Daukas, one S at the end, please, .substack.com. And that gives you access to all the articles I've written. You can subscribe for free. It's not about, to your point before, not about making money. We're about trying to get people healthy and provide another outlet for people. I can be reached at Courageous Nobility at protonmail.com. So that's my own deal. And then my Twitter account is trying to get creative, but something that has been out there, at Noble Courage Now. At Noble Courage Now is my handle. So we're trying to get a lot of that. That's going right now. I have a couple of book projects in the pipeline that myself and Dr. Yates are working on, and doing a lot of training, talking to good men like you. A couple podcasts I've already done that has kind of taken off and given me the opportunity to be featured in some conferences coming up. I'm speaking in one of the keynotes at the Breaching the Barricade conference in Elkhart, Indiana, October 6th and 7th. So if you're in Elkhart, just go to thankyouofficers.com or Breaching the Barricade 2023, and you can sign up. It's the largest law enforcement appreciation conference in the country. You probably would do well hooking up with those guys and taking a look there. I got involved, like I said, with early on with some of these people a couple months ago, and it's taken off. And to your point, Chris, 150 people that you talk to, I'm sure that they will say something like this, because I got told this: Jeff, no one talks like you. No one says the things with legitimate authority while on the job like you're saying. So let's do something with that. And the guy said, what's your website? I like my email, and he starts laughing at me. So we're developing this, but I'll tell you, people don't like to talk about this, but when you do, the entry gates into people's hearts open, relationships flourish, and change happens. It does. I'm living proof. So jump on board, contact me, Courageous Nobility at protonmail.com, subscribe at my Substack, jeffdaukas.substack.com. It's a mouthful, but I think it'll be worth your while.
Perfect. Well, thanks for sharing that. Definitely, everybody go check out Jeff. He is amazing. Some of the stuff that he's writing, opens my eyes up, and I'm like, wow, okay, cool. So I'll put all those links down in the description down below as well. Last question I like to ask everybody before we wrap up is, what is your top tip to self-happiness?
Somebody said once, a man greater than I, to thine own self be true, right? I would say the top tip to happiness is know yourself. But I would submit, Chris, that it's a double-edged sword, right? You can't know yourself without allowing other people to contribute past that false bias that we put up. We're our self-talk worst critics, and we are our greatest inflators because of pride. So getting a tribe of people that you trust to be authentic lets you take an open look at yourself. You want to do something crazy? I would challenge all your listeners and viewers, especially in law enforcement. I don't care if you're an officer or if you're a commander or a chief. I encourage you to do a 360 eval and watch what happens. Watch what happens when you say, I want to be eval by my subordinates, my peers, and my higher ups. You watch the pushback, because people don't want to be true to themselves. They don't want people to blow up the gaslit version they have of them, right? So to thine own self be true. Know yourself, brother, because then you have something to give to other people correctly.
It's hard. Even somebody who's in this field and wants to grow himself the best in that, I still find times like people tell me something and be like, my first reaction still is like, your guard kind of comes up, and I go, wait a second, actually, no, okay, why are you saying that? Like, why do you, where are you seeing that? Like, okay, cool, tell me about that.
Great question. Where do you see that in my life?
Where do you see that? Because, yes, the people can project their own stuff onto you as well, but there's some truth in all of it. There's always some truth in everything. We know this is law enforcement. You've been to enough. Anybody who's been in the job for more than 5 minutes has seen enough scenes to know that
Yeah.
you've got to have that reflection. You got to look at. You got to get different perspectives, and that goes
Yeah,
for
and I'll
your own
say
life
this
as well.
before we wrap up, I would be remiss to say that knowing yourself requires you to have a good foundation and not an upside down pyramid. I loved that when you did that.
Mm.
I really want people do your little V hand thing again.
Please,
Yeah,
you want it
see,
this way. You want it this
yes.
way, not this way.
And
Yeah.
you can't put any weight on that little pinnacle like you're spinning a
Well,
top. You don't balance a house
can
on
you,
it.
can you see this right here?
I love it. Yeah,
That's why it's there, because that's the
yeah, I
pyramid.
love
That's
that.
the
And so
self pyramid.
people got to remember, knowing yourself that requires you to have a foundation. And for me, my foundation is faith. Again, I'd be remiss if I didn't let you. I mean, you have to know like who you are and what your purpose is. And once you got that solid, my faith in Christ is my driver. It
Yeah.
just is.
Yeah, it's your vehicle to deliver your purpose and deliver yourself.
Correct. Yeah.
And I love that you said that, because there's so many people, and I'm not religious myself, but I know it. There's so many, and they go, oh, my purpose is my religion. I'm like, no, your purpose is different. You're driven with the religion.
Correct. I would agree with that.
So yeah, no, I love that. Any last words, Jeff, before we close out?
Yeah, just thank you. Thank you for having enough institutional courage to go against, as you know, the term institutional inbreeding. We didn't
Yeah.
even talk about the drivers of administrative stress and how that destroys lives, right? Everybody,
Yeah.
inequitable promotions, write-ups, shifting community support, right? Loyalty betrayal, all those things can play in. But I think that you can everybody deals with that in every job, certainly, to be sure.
Yeah.
In law enforcement, maybe we see a more visceral look at that. But here's the problem. When you make that issue the issue, I think you're ignoring the heart. You're
Yeah.
ignoring the real problem. That's a symptom. The real issue is, do you know who you are? Do you know in this circumstance how you're going to respond? If you have that figured out, man, give me any circumstance, because the paradigm for what I believe, because I proactively have a mission, will be set. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. That's why I don't call my training leadership training. I don't call it as like I call it as we eliminate burnout, because a burned out leader is no better than a burned out rookie, and no
Correct.
better than a burned out chief, no better than a burned out criminal. Anybody who's burned out is going to do things that don't stand in their values, that don't stand with them. And so
Right.
I totally agree. I see all these leadership doing all these different things, and I'm like, how burned out are they?
Yeah, absolutely.
How
And that
burned out,
causes
how
stress
burned
all the way
out
down the
are
line.
they? The leaders that I know that I've talked to that aren't burned out, that are thriving, that are fully energetic, that have their everything in line, like don't really need my training because they have it all lined up. Their departments don't have any issues at all. There's a lady that I just interviewed last week, from up by Portland, Oregon.
Right.
She hasn't lost any staff, or she started just before COVID. She hasn't lost any staff to resigning since she got in, because
That's
she's all
unbelievable.
about wellness. She's all about, let's take care of them. Let's make sure that they're the best. They incorporated in, you talked about, like leave and that, like taking a week off. She's like,
Mhm.
anybody can nominate somebody else if they feel like they need critical incident leave, not admin leave, but critical incident leave. And they
Right.
can get 3 days without questions asked,
That's
up to,
beautiful.
up to 3 days without questions asked. And so she's like, after a shooting, like they've had 3 shootings this year. She's like they instantly they put on it. I was like, how do you deal with the staffing load, like the staffing thing? She's like, we don't have issues, because again, you talked about community. Our community is so strong that when I put out a page for somebody to fill in for somebody because critical incidents happen and somebody needs time off, or there's been something that's happened and they need time off, whether it's work or relationship, she's like, I get 10 people to put their hand up for one person.
Wow.
She's like,
that's unheard of.
Yeah, it's unheard of. I was like, wow, like, can I come work for you?
Right. That's what I was thinking. Like Portland, it rains a lot, but
yeah, I was like, but yeah, no, but this is what she said. And it's a smaller station of not a ton, like I think it was about 120 officers, which isn't that small. But
right.
I was just like, that is incredible. Like, this is not something that you hear about this right now. The messaging is not that. She's like, I've got one person that's retiring in 6 months. She's like, otherwise, we don't struggle to fill positions because we don't have that many all the time. So there's that scarcity. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah, so it is amazing. So on your topic there, yes, leadership is so important.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any other last words that you have, Jeff?
I would just say make sure that if you find yourself in a rut, you got to be proactive enough and you got to be mature enough in your life, recognizing that it is one just a job. I'm doing a conference where I'm talking about the higher calling of nobility of policing, and that's all very true. But it's still just a job.
Mm,
At some point, you're not going to be working as a cop. I mean, you know, and
yeah,
so you're going to be doing something else with your life. You better have a firm sense of who you are. Surround yourself with people that are valuable. So I'll say, and I want you to put this link there too, travisyates.org. He
I'd
has
say
this
that's
courageous
all.
leadership stuff. It has been a huge, huge source. Travis Yates, Yates.org. Just got his doctorate. Amazing man. Been doing this at a high level for 30 years. And he's got the secret sauce. And I'm telling you, you start linking up with me and him and some other people in this tribe, and you need to get the community going. You got to get people involved. You have to be mature enough to say, I don't know it all. I'm going to reach out to Chris Chandler. It's like for your viewers, me and you, we didn't even talk about how we met. Me and you met through a third party, a shared relationship who said, hey, you should talk to this guy. Hey, Jeff, you should talk to this guy. And
Yeah.
that's how change happens. And so now I'm
Mhm.
going to be able to talk to my friends and say, you got to talk to this Chris character. He's got the juice, man. This guy's got something to say. And then you can direct people my way. And then we can work together
Yeah.
to make people more resilient and better off and increase longevity. And there's all upsides. And so when the next Ferguson hits or the next whatever hits, we are already set up with a group of people that understand community relationships, understand the calling of our job, understand I don't need 50 hours a week or 100 hours a week to kill my family, right? We work together and we have that stuff in place early on because
Yeah.
that's going to be the difference between life and death.
I love that, man. Yeah, community is everything. I wouldn't be talking to you, Brandon, who connected us together. Wouldn't have
Right.
talked to him. I wouldn't be giving all the proceeds of this motorcycle retreat to his not for profit. Community is a massive thing, but then also I think even beyond that is that communication. When you can communicate, then you
Sure.
can actually get into those communities. You can actually listen to them and get the most out of them. So excellent words. Thank you, Jeff, so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your story. I know that we really some of the stuff that we talked about off camera, we didn't even get into. So we just touched the
Right.
iceberg. So I'm sure that there will be a follow-up episode in the future at some point. Uh,
Outstanding.
and to everybody, I said this at the very beginning, take one thing away today. There is so many different things that Jeff and I talked about. There's so many different little nuggets, as I call them, that you can
Mm,
take away and implement today, right now. So start doing that. If you change just one thing each day, that's 365 different things over a year.
mm,
Think about
outstanding.
where you would be in a year's time if you just implemented one thing a week. That's 52 different changes. And you actually put
Mm,
them into practice and kept going on each one. So really take that and be vigilant with it. Remember, again, we're sponsored by Create From Why. And right now we are promoting our motorcycle retreat. We have a few places left. So make sure you get to motorcyclemastermind.com and reach out to me so that we can book in a time to have a conversation and get you on that so you can recharge, grow, and most importantly, ride. Till next time, thank you. Train hard, test easy, because we are tested every single day, especially as police officers, and you may as well be prepared for it, both physically and mentally. Stay safe.